Welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Understanding Politics. Let's get started. A Beginner's Guide to Understanding Politics. It's essential that every citizen is educated, informed, and motivated. You are the critical element in a democracy's success. Onward to Part 1. Understanding politics. Know how your government works so you can effect meaningful change. Part 1. The three branches of government. Understanding politics. The president holds office for 4 years and can only be elected twice. He represents the first branch of government, the executive branch. He is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, meets with world leaders, and negotiates treaties and alliances. The Senate has 100 members. Each state has 2 senators, regardless of their population. This was to ensure that each state was fairly represented. Senators serve for 6 years, and they can be elected over and over again. 1/3 of the senators are up for re-election every 2 years. If there is a 50-50 tie in the Senate, the vice president casts the deciding vote. There are 435 members elected to the House of Representatives. Each serves for 2 years and is up for re-election every 2 years. The members of the House of Representatives are determined by the population of each state. California has 53 House members, Wisconsin has 8, Texas has 36, and New York has 27. Together, the Senate and the House of Representatives are known as the Congress, the second branch of government. The primary purpose of the Congress is to enact laws. If a law is to pass, it must be passed by the Senate and the House. If the President likes the law, he will sign off on it. If he does not like the law, he may veto it and send it back to Congress to reconsider. But if both houses of Congress are determined to pass a particular law, they can override a presidential veto with a 2/3 majority. If either house of Congress does not get a 2/3 majority, the legislation fails. Congress can still work with the president, rewrite the law to remove his objections, and get the law approved. Sometimes, the House and Senate will pass different versions of the same law. At that point, the legislation goes to a conference committee made up of House members and senators where differences are reconciled. Then the legislation goes back to both houses for approval. The Supreme Court consists of 9 judges, and they are appointed for life. Theoretically, this is so they remain unbiased by the party or president who appointed them. Their job is to interpret the law, to make sure that legislation passed by Congress and signed by the president is constitutional. They are also authorized to make sure that legislation passed by any state Congress. Each state also has their own House and Senate, and signed by the state's governor is constitutional. Laws created by initiative. If enough citizens in a state sign a petition and get enough signatures, their initiative is eligible for a vote. If the initiative passes, it becomes a law of the state. However, the Supreme Court can choose to decide if the law is in fact constitutional. The Constitution. Parts of the U.S. Constitution. Preamble. Introduces reasons for creating the document. Article 1. Outlines the legislative branch. Article 2. Outlines the executive branch. Article 3. Outlines the judicial branch. Article 4. Discusses relations between the states and between the states and the national government. Article 5. Describes how to amend the Constitution. Article 6 declares the Constitution to be the supreme law of the land. Article 7 lists requirements for ratifying the Constitution. 27 amendments, modifications to the Constitution. End of Part 1. A Beginner's Guide to Understanding Politics. An informed electorate will select representatives who will better serve their needs. Since many Americans were never taught politics, also known as civics, in school, and don't understand how their system of government works, many base their decisions on what they hear on cable television. However, understand the cable shows have an agenda too. Onward to Part 2. A Beginner's Guide to Understanding Politics. Know how your government works so you can effect meaningful change. Part 2. A deeper look inside the U.S. government. The Executive Branch and the President's Cabinet. The President's Cabinet advises him on government affairs, assists in creating legislation and enforcing laws. Departments: Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Interior, Justice, Labor and State, Transportation, Treasury, and Veterans Affairs. The head of each department is called the Secretary of that department. Executive Branch. 6 important government agencies. EPA. Makes sure the environment is protected, works with global warming issues, regulates the coal and oil and gas industries, promotes alternative sources of energy. Veterans Affairs, VA, supports the country's veterans, in charge of America's veteran hospitals. FDA, determines whether a new drug is safe for human consumption. OSHA, makes sure that companies follow strict worker safety guidelines. USDA, manages the food supply, determines if a food is grown organically or not, administers the food stamp program, oversees the Forest Service to make sure public lands are protected and well managed. NSA, protects the country against terrorism. Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. It instructs the government as to the type of relationship it will have with its citizens. It sets limits on the kind of laws it can pass. These 10 articles often serve as a foundation for the courts to determine if laws are constitutional. First Amendment. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to peacefully assemble, free to petition the government for a redress of grievances without punishment. Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms. Fourth Amendment. The right to be protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. No warrant shall be issued without probable cause. Fifth Amendment. Must be properly indicted of a crime to be put in jail. Cannot be tried twice for the same crime. Can plead the fifth and not answer any questions that might self-incriminate. Sixth Amendment. Due process. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury in the state and district wherein the crime was committed, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to be able to obtain witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Eighth Amendment. The government cannot authorize cruel and unusual punishment against its citizens. Amending the Constitution. If a law passes that goes against the intent of the Constitution, it's deemed unconstitutional. However, the Constitution can be changed through a constitutional amendment. This has happened 27 times in our history. To get a constitutional amendment approved, 2/3 of each House of Congress and 3/4 of the states must ratify the amendment. Once ratified, it can only be changed by another constitutional amendment, i.e. prohibition. A congressional law cannot repeal it. The powerful role of the House Majority Leader. The majority party controls significant power in the House of Representatives. It is up to the leadership of the majority party to decide which bills will be voted on and in what order. Even if there is a majority of House members interested in a piece of legislation, the majority leader still makes the final determination. Senate Majority Leader. The Senate Majority Leader is one of the most powerful positions in the U.S. government. As Majority Leader of the Senate, he has exclusive authority to determine whether laws will be voted on in the Senate, even if a law has already passed the House. For example, the current Majority Leader, Republican Mitch McConnell, has not allowed votes on literally hundreds of bills that have already been approved by the Democrat-controlled House. The Senate Majority Leader continued. Furthermore, the Majority Leader has the important role of accepting the President's nominees for lifetime judges who preside in state and appellate courts. This is important because the Senate has sole authority to accept or reject a President's nominees. The House of Representatives plays no part in the approval process. The Senate Filibuster. The filibuster is a procedural strategy of the Senate. If the minority party is fundamentally against a law coming up for a vote, and it looks like the law is going to pass, those that are against the law can filibuster the legislation and require the Senate to pass the law with 60 votes, or a supermajority. Oftentimes, this requires the majority to win over objectors of the law by compromising and allowing concessions to objecting senators. The Senate, the nuclear option, and the Supreme Court. In 2013, Democrats controlled the Senate, but nothing was getting past the Republican filibuster. Even the president's cabinet positions were not being filled. Entire departments were without leadership. So in 2013, Democrats voted to abolish the filibuster and replace it with majority rule on nearly all confirmation votes. If a majority of the Senate supported a presidential nominee, he or she was confirmed. The legislation was named the nuclear option. In 2013, the nuclear option excluded nominees of the Supreme Court, but in April 2017, Senate Republicans extended the nuclear option to the Supreme Court nominees in order to approve Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. End of Part 2. Thanks for watching the presentation. If you liked what I created and want to support my work, please donate via PayPal at greenlightemporrium73@gmail.com. Any donation of $50 or more will receive a free set of flashcards of the entire presentation. Great for kids, teenagers, and the entire family. I look forward to making the next presentation. I want to dive deeper into PACs and super PACs, who funds them and influences them, citizens' rights and Miranda, organizations that support different grassroots issues, state and local government issues, the importance of circuit, district, and appellate courts, the current Supreme Court and the vote, and so much more. There are many rules and procedures in U.S. politics, and many nuances to each issue affecting us. I hope you're encouraged to support this endeavor. Together we can create a more informed electorate who can then make important decisions that affect all of us. Thanks in advance.